John Anderson. John Anderson may refer to business. John Anderson, Scottish businessman 1747–1820, Scottish merchant and founder of Fermoy, Ireland. John Byers Anderson 1817–1897, American educator, military officer and railroad executive. John Macthakar Anderson 1835–1915, Scottish architect. John Anderson, publisher 1836–1910, Norwegian-American publisher. John Anderson, merchant 1852–1924, Scottish merchant of Singapore and Eastcote. Sir John Anderson, 1st Baronet of Harold Priory 1878–1963, Scottish haulage contractor. John E. Anderson 1917–2011, American businessman, namesake of the UCLA Anderson School of Management. John Anderson, Cal Scale 1925–2000, founder of Cal Scale Model Railroad detail parts manufacturer. John Anderson, New Zealand businessman, born 1938, New Zealand businessman, founder of Kentucky Holidays and professional public speaker. Jock R. Anderson, born 1941, Australian agricultural economist. John Anderson, inventor 1942–2012, founder, director, and the Chief Technology Officer of Heart Sign Technologies. John Anderson, New Zealand businessman, born 1945–2018, Chief Executive of the ANZ National Bank in New Zealand. John Anderson, Chairman, Non-Executive Chairman of the North East Business and Innovation Centre, Sunderland. John L. Anderson, shipbuilder 1868–1941, Seattle steamboat pioneer and shipbuilder. Entertainment. Music. John Anderson, jazz trumpeter 1921–1974, American jazz musician. John Anderson, John Roy Anderson, born 1944, lead singer of the British band Yes. John Anderson, producer, born 1948, Northern Irish composer and producer. John Anderson, musician, born 1954, American country musician. John Anderson, album, 1980 debut album. John Anderson, vocalist for the British rock band Charlie, founded 1971. Theatre, television and film. John Murray Anderson, 1886–1954, Newfoundland American theatre director. John Anderson, actor 1922–1992, American actor. John Anderson, TV personality, born 1931, Scottish television personality, referee on the series Gladiators. John Anderson, sportscaster, born 1965, American television sports journalist and co-host of Wipeout. John H. Anderson, American set decorator. John Anderson, director, born 1954, American documentary film director. Writing. J. Redwood Anderson, 1883–1964, English poet. John J. Anderson, 1956–1989, writer and editor covering computers and technology. John David Anderson, born 1975, American writer. Other entertainment. John Henry Anderson, 1814–1874, Scottish magician. John Alvin Anderson, 1869–1948, Swedish-American photographer. John Cornbread Anderson, American folk artist. Military. John Byers Anderson, 1817–1897, educator, railroad contractor and United States Army officer. John F. Anderson, 1832–1902, brigadier general during the American Civil War. John B. Anderson, United States Army officer, 1891–1976, American general. John W. Anderson, sailor, 1899–1976, master mariner and Commodore, United States Lines, captain, SS United States. John Anderson, British Army officer, 1908–1988, first commander of the Ulster Defence Regiment. John Evelyn Anderson, 1916–2007, British Army officer. John Anderson, VC, 1918–1943, English Victoria Cross recipient. John Rogers Anderson, born 1941, Canadian admiral and ambassador to NATO. Politics. United States. John Anderson, New Jersey politician, 1665–1736, colonel who served as acting governor of New Jersey in 1736. John Anderson, Maine politician, 1792–1853. John T. Anderson, 1804–1879, American politician in Virginia. John Alexander Anderson, 1834–1892, United States Representative from Kansas. John C. Anderson, politician, 1862, Wisconsin State Assemblyman. John Anderson, Wisconsin Senator, 1870–1954, Wisconsin State Senator. Jack C. Anderson, 1904–1981, United States Representative from California. John Hope Anderson, 1912–2005, American politician in Pennsylvania. John Anderson, Jr., 1917–2014, Governor of Kansas, 1961–1965. John B. Anderson, 1922–2017, United States Representative from Illinois and 1980 presidential candidate. John C. Anderson, lawyer, born 1975, United States Attorney for the District of New Mexico. John N. Anderson, American politician in California. Johnny Anderson, politician, member of the Utah House of Representatives. United Kingdom. Sir John Anderson, 1st Baronet, of Mill Hill, died 1813, British politician, MP for City of London, 1793–1806. John Anderson, diplomatic writer, 1795–1845, Scottish diplomatic writer. John Anderson, colonial administrator, 1858–1918, British governor of Straits Settlements and later of Ceylon. John Anderson, 1st Viscount Waverley, 1882–1958, British civil servant and politician. John Anderson, 3rd Viscount Waverley, born 1949, British peer. John Anderson, trade unionist, British trade union leader. Canada. John Hawkins Anderson, 1805–1870, member of the Canadian Senate. John Anderson, Newfoundland politician, 1855–1930, Newfoundland businessman and politician. John Victor Anderson, 1918–1982, Canadian politician in Alberta. Other countries. John Anderson, mayor, 1820–1897, mayor of Christchurch, New Zealand, blacksmith, engineer, businessman. John Gerard Anderson, 1836–1911, Scottish-born educationalist and public servant in colonial Queensland. Crawford Anderson, John Crawford Anderson, c. 1848–1930, New Zealand politician, MP for Bruce electorate. John Anderson, Australian politician, born 1956, Deputy Prime Minister of Australia and leader of the National Party of Australia, 1999–2005. Religion and philosophy. John Anderson, theologian and controversialist, 1668. John Anderson, theologian, 1748–1830, founder of the first Presbyterian seminary in America. John Anderson, missionary, 1805–1855, Scottish missionary. John Henry Anderson, 1854–1913, Anglican rector and instigator of Tooting Bec Lido. John Anderson, Archbishop of Musoni, 1866–1943, Anglican Church of Canada Metropolitan Bishop. John Anderson, philosopher, 1893–1962, Australian philosopher. John Mueller Anderson, 1914–1999, American philosopher. John Anderson, Bishop of British Columbia, 1912–1969, Anglican Church of Canada Bishop. Science. John Anderson, natural philosopher, 1726–1796, Scottish natural philosopher. John Anderson, physician, died 1804, English physician. John Anderson, zoologist, 1833–1900, Scottish zoologist. John Anderson, New Zealand engineer, 1849–1934, Scottish rugby union player and engineer. John F. Anderson, scientist, 1873–1958, Director of the United States Hygienic Laboratory. John August Anderson, 1876–1959, American physicist and astronomer. John Edward Anderson, psychologist, 1893–1966, American psychologist. John Stuart Anderson, 1908–1990, British/Australian inorganic chemist. John Anderson, pathologist, 1918–2011, British pathologist. J. Edward Anderson, born 1927, American engineer. John Maxwell Anderson, 1928–1982, Scottish surgeon and cancer specialist. John Robert Anderson, chemist, 1928–2007, Australian chemist/materials scientist. John D. Anderson, born 1937, American aerospace engineer. John L. Anderson, born 1945, American chemical engineer. John Robert Anderson, psychologist, born 1947, Canadian psychologist and computer scientist. John G. Anderson, born 1948, seismologist. John Anderson, Scottish engineer, 1814–1886. Sports. American football. John E. Anderson, American football, American college football player and coach. John W. Anderson, American football, 1933–1998, American football coach. John Anderson, American football, born 1956, Green Bay Packers linebacker. Association football. John Anderson, footballer, born 1878–1878. English footballer who played for Woolwich, Arsenal and Portsmouth. John Anderson, footballer, born 1879–1879. Scottish footballer who played for Chesterfield Town. John Anderson, footballer, born 1881–1881, 1942, Scottish footballer who played for Heart of Midlothian and Falkirk. John Anderson, footballer, born 1915–1915, 1987, Scottish footballer, scorer for Portsmouth in the 1939 FA Cup final. John Anderson, footballer, born 1921–1921, 2006, English footballer, scorer for Manchester United in the 1948 FA Cup final. John Anderson, footballer, born 1928–1928, 2001, Scottish footballer who played as an inside forward. Johnny Anderson, footballer, 1929–2001, Scottish footballer who most notably played for Leicester City. John Anderson, footballer, born 1931–1931, 2003, English footballer who played for Grimsby Town. John Anderson, footballer, born 1937, Scottish-born footballer who played for Stoke City and Australia. John Anderson, footballer, born 1959, Irish international footballer who played for Newcastle United. John Anderson, footballer, born 1972, Scottish footballer best known for playing for Greenock Morton. Baseball and cricket. John Anderson, outfielder 1873–1949, American baseball player. John Anderson, pitcher 1929–1998, American baseball player. John Anderson, baseball coach, born 1955, American baseball coach. John Anderson, cricketer, born 1955, Australian cricketer. John Anderson, Irish cricketer, born 1982, Irish cricketer. Other sports. John Anderson, Australian footballer 1888–1957, Australian rules footballer. John Anderson, discus thrower 1907–1948, American Olympic discus thrower. John Anderson, runner, born 1936, British runner. John Anderson, bowls, born 1912. John Anderson, rugby league 1913–1984, New Zealand international. John Anderson, canoeist 1924–2001, American sprint canoer. John Anderson, ice hockey general manager 1934–2009, general manager of the Buffalo Sabres. John Anderson, sailor, born 1939, Australian sailor. John Anderson, racing driver 1944–1986, American driver, who is known for a crash at Daytona in 1981. John Anderson, ice hockey, born 1957, Canadian ice hockey player. John Anderson, equestrian, born 1966, Canadian Olympic equestrian. John Anderson, hurler, born 1978, Irish hurler. John Anderson, water polo, Canadian water polo player. Others. John Anderson, carpenter 1759–1832, friend of Robert Burns. John Anderson, engraver 1775, Scottish engraver. John Anderson, genealogist 1789–1832, Scottish genealogist. John Anderson, genealogist, FL 1825, Scottish genealogist. John C. Anderson, judge 1863–1940, Associate Justice and Chief Justice of the Alabama Supreme Court. John W. Anderson, Iowa judge, Justice of the Iowa Supreme Court. John Anderson, classical scholar 1870–1952, Camden Professor of Ancient History at the University of Oxford. John Matheson Anderson, born 1941, British linguist and emeritus professor of English language at the University of Edinburgh. John Anderson, escaped slave, American slave who escaped to Canada in the 1860s, leading to a famous extradition case.